Hello. So I've gotten a lot of requests to start a YouTube channel and do YouTube, and I've been pretty hesitant, but I think I'm coming around, and I think that I'm gonna try to do this. So I was gonna come and do a little introduction. I really am going to try and give a pretty condensed introduction history. So my husband and I went through infertility and recurrent loss before we actually got pregnant and had children. So I feel like I kind of have to back up and explain that some before getting to where we are now. So after Chris and I got married in 2014, we were a little older, so they say. I was 28 and Chris was 29, and we knew we wanted a lot. Well, I said a lot. We knew we wanted more than one child, and I always was the person to want to spread my children out. I wanted to be able to enjoy alone time, one-on-one time with them as babies until they got older before I had another child. Don't make plans because God laughs. So we started trying almost immediately, and once we started trying, I just kind of knew something was wrong. I didn't have a reason to know. When you're trying to conceive, 6 months, they say 6 months minimum. If you get pregnant before 6 months, you're doing really good. Well, I didn't get pregnant within 6 months, but I did get pregnant at like 8 or 9 months. So I did get pregnant without help, but I still knew something was wrong. So we go for our first doctor's appointment at like 10-ish weeks, and we go in for an ultrasound, and it's my mom, myself, and my husband, and my mom and I just knew, like, there was nothing, no heartbeat, no baby, we couldn't see anything. So the doctor comes in and explains that one of two things is happening. I'm either nowhere close to what we thought I was. My numbers were completely off, and I just wasn't far along enough yet to be able to see anything in my uterus. Or I was going to miscarry. And the second happened. I ended up in the emergency room. My poor dad had to take me. My mom was out of town. My sister was at work. My dad had to come and get me, and bless his soul, I know he did not want to have to be in that room with me going through that. It was bad. It was pretty bad. So I ended up miscarrying my first pregnancy, and I still just knew something was wrong. I couldn't let it go. Like, I knew something was wrong, even though I didn't have a reason. So, because it's very common and normal to have miscarriages, it's not something that we talk about often, not my family, but our society. It makes women feel like we can't talk about it. It makes us, it's an uncomfortable topic, and I think people don't know what to say, and it makes them uncomfortable, so they try and shush people from talking about it so that we don't make other people feel uncomfortable, and that's bull. Like, it's not fair. You're not alone. 1 in 3 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. That's a lot. You know somebody who has had a miscarriage. So, I do talk about it. Sorry if it makes you uncomfortable, but it's not fair. I want every person who's going through this to know that they are not alone, and that they shouldn't have to be quiet at all either. So I did miscarry. We kept trying. And because I knew something was wrong, I just had that feeling. I was talking back and forth with my MFM, which is a maternal fetal medicine doctor, who is the one who told me that I was going to miscarry. So there's something called MTHFR, which is a gene mutation. It's pretty common. I think, don't quote me, I think it's like 50 to 60% of people have some variant of this mutation, which mine came back positive. So at that point, my doctor said, I really think you need to go ahead and see fertility. So I was skipping, happy as could be, because finally somebody was listening, and we were getting to start this process. So We go to see a fertility specialist, and we go in, and it's a super fun appointment. You get to talk about everybody you've ever known in your family, every problem they've ever had. If you know a problem and it was in your family, you go and talk about it. So we did that. We found out at that appointment that I have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which means my body produces a lot of follicles, but the eggs inside of the follicles are typically not great quality. So a normal woman produces like 4-ish eggs, maybe 2 on each side, sometimes a little more, sometimes less. And I had 11 on each side every single time, minimum. So I definitely had that. We also did some testing. We did genetic testing, and I am actually a precarrier for cystic fibrosis. I'm not a carrier for cystic fibrosis. I'm a precarrier for Fragile X syndrome, which Fragile X is a little trickier to understand. It has to do with how many repeating alleles you have on that gene. So if it's under a certain number, you are not a carrier at all. If it's within this, you're a precarrier, and if it's above this, you're a carrier. So I am just a precarrier, and Chris is not a carrier or precarrier at all. So we did not know that we had Fragile X carriers, precarriers, anything about Fragile X in our family. We've never had any history of anyone with Fragile X. So that was new. I also have a clotting factor called factor V Leiden, which typically is not a big deal until you start trying to have children. And because your hormones are higher in pregnancy, certain hormones impact your clotting, the way your blood clots. So when you're pregnant, the hormones impact your clotting, and you will develop clots much quicker and more frequently with a clotting factor late term in your pregnancy. So a super high risk for that is stillbirths. So we had the PCOS, clotting factor, Fragile X, and we also got to do a super fun test called I always get them confused, HSG, hysterosalpingogram. Yes, HSG, where they use a dye, they inject it into your uterus, super fun, and they watch with an x-ray machine. So what they're wanting to see is when they inject this dye, it should fill your uterus, and then it should spill into your fallopian tubes. So it's looking to make sure that your fallopian tubes are open. Well, I'm laying on the table, and they decide they want to play Simon Says, and I am dying. And the lady's like, "Oh, are you okay?" I wasn't breathing. I was dead. And she's, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." So obviously something was happening. She was looking at the x-ray, and she says, "Caitlin, can you cough for me?" And I was like, "Girl, I can't breathe. There's no way I can cough too." So I'm all like, that was my last breath. And that didn't do whatever she needed it to do. So then she says, "Can you roll on your left side?" Girl, no, I cannot. I cannot breathe right now. I cannot be doing the hokey pokey on this table, flipping around. So somehow I muster every ounce of energy to roll my butt to the left, and it still didn't do anything. So we found out that my left tube was also blocked. So I had a lot of fun things going on. Chris also had a clotting factor, but that really doesn't impact us getting pregnant. So doctor says, well, your best bet is going to be IVF. Everyone's best bet is IVF. It's the most effective. And he also said, that will be a minimum of $30,000. And I said, yeah, right. So we decided to try IUI first. We weren't ready to jump straight into IVF. We did IUI first. There's several different ways you can do it. The way we did it was I took several medications to help stimulate the follicles and hopefully make them a better quality. And we monitored to make sure that the follicles were on my correct side. There was no sense in doing an IUI, paying thousands of dollars if it was on my left side, because my left side was not open. So we did the first one. We got lucky. My dominant follicle was on the right side. We did IUI, and it worked. And then it failed. So I got pregnant, and then I miscarried. So that was my second miscarriage in a row. Super, super hard. If you've ever had a miscarriage, I'm sorry. I mean, I wish there were words that I could give you that would help your heart, but there just aren't. So that sucks. We did a second IUI, and it did not work. After my second miscarriage, they did look at my immune system. Sometimes your immune system does not recognize that a baby is part of you, and it sees it as foreign, and so it tries to rid the body of something foreign. I definitely had high NK cells, which are natural killer cells, and cytokines, which both have to do with how your body would handle or not handle a pregnancy. So they added another medication for my next round. The second round did not work. The third round did work. So on our second round, we basically decided if the third round did not work, we were going to IVF. So I started researching, because we could not pay over $30,000. We couldn't pay under $30,000. We couldn't pay, nope, couldn't do it. So trying to figure out what we were going to do, how we were going to do this, because we wanted to have a biological child. That's another thing. This is kind of a side story, but so often when we're going through fertility, infertility, recurrent loss, people often say, why don't you just adopt? Well, that's not what we need to hear. So if you're a friend, please don't ask why we don't just adopt. Another little bit of backstory. I've always wanted to adopt. Chris and I had always said that we would adopt if we could. But just because someone wants to adopt and even plans to adopt does not mean that they don't also want a biological child. That is a right that we have. That is a desire that I am allowed to have. I am allowed to want to have a biological child. Does that mean that we would love and adopt a child any less? Absolutely not. Does that mean that now we don't want to adopt? Absolutely not. But when you have friends going through fertility and loss, is not a good idea to say just adopt. Because also, let me let you in on a secret. You don't just adopt. It is hard. We looked into it. It is expensive, unless you go through the foster system. And even through the foster system, it's hard. It is draining. So it's not like it's made out to be just adopt. It's so much easier. It's not. It's not easier. It's not easier. It's not cheaper. Just don't do it. Don't say it. So we moved on to our third. Our third round worked, and then it failed again. And I had my third miscarriage in a row. And luckily, I had already been researching and had found a few low-cost clinics in the United States that IVF was way cheaper, like $5,000 total. Well, not total. $5,000 for your round of IVF, not including your medications. So Chris and I decided that we were going to go to a clinic in Arizona called New Direction Fertility Centers. Their IVF, I think, is $4,800 for a round of IVF, not including medications, and then $6,000 with the PGS, which is the genetic testing. And then we had to pay for our medications on top of that. So we decided to go there, and I cannot recommend them more highly. Like, cannot. They were amazing. So my mom and I go out to Arizona. We started my cycle at the end of June of 2017. So we do an egg retrieval on July 5th of 2017. They retrieved 27 eggs. 27 eggs. Of those 27 eggs, only 21 were mature. Of those 21 mature eggs, only 19 fertilized, which I say only. Those numbers are amazing. So 19 eggs fertilized. Day 1, I had 19 embryos growing. By day 3, I had 20 embryos growing, which I was in complete shock because that does not happen. One of my embryos fertilized late, so that's how we had that. And then by day 5, I had 14 embryos that were biopsied and frozen. So we sent the embryos for genetic testing. Of those 14 embryos, only 3 were abnormal. And it was super abnormal, not just abnormal. Super, super, super abnormal. So we get there, and I am scared to death because here I have been told that the reason I've been miscarrying is genetics. And I might not be great at math, but 3 out of 14, 10 out of 14 normal? So you're telling me that all 3 of my abnormals were the first 3 pregnancies out of 14 pregnancies? So I, of course, began to worry and started to worry that, oh my gosh, we're going to do this. I'm going to spend all this money. We're going to do all of this. It's so hard. And I'm going to miscarry again. It's my body. It's not the embryos. It's me. So that was super hard, super scary. We had to decide what we were going to do. And I had no clue because the fear is paralyzing. It's not knowing that is the hardest. So we talked, and finally my mom and I were going back out to Arizona for my transfer, and I was on the plane and I still did not know what we should do. I knew what we wanted to do, but I was so afraid that I couldn't make that decision. I'm already indecisive, but good Lord, when you have to decide how many embryos you're gonna put, that is a whole other level of indecisive. So my mom and I are stopped on our layover. We flew from Atlanta to Phoenix, and I get an email that says, Caitlin, your transfer is in the morning. We really need to know what you have decided. We need to thaw your embryos. If we don't know, we won't be able to do your transfer. So I texted Chris really fast and was like, holy crap, what do we do? Are we really doing this? One or two, what are we gonna do? Finally, I just marked it down, closed my eyes, wrote 2 on the paper. Well, I guess it wasn't paper, but actually I did have to write it on the paper because, funny story, you have to get these papers notarized because they don't play with this, and you have to sign everything in front of a notary. We left that part blank because we didn't know. So we were on the plane, and I wrote in 2, snapped a picture of it, sent the email really quickly. We went the next day. We decided to transfer 2, and basically that's where our pregnancy journey started. I don't know if you know this, but when you do a transfer, you have to drink and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink some water. So we go, and I am about to explode on this table. And they come in and they do our transfer and they take our picture. And I finally got a picture of an embryo with my first 3 pregnancies. My first one, so that's another part of this. when I switched doctors and went to Arizona, we found out that most likely my first pregnancy was an ectopic pregnancy, which was why I was in so much pain. Which, if you know anything about ectopic pregnancies, they are super dangerous. If your tube ruptures, you can bleed to death internally. Thank God that I did not, but the doctor all but confirmed that my first pregnancy was an ectopic pregnancy. So I didn't have anything from my first pregnancy. I never got pictures. I never got a heartbeat. That's hard. That's really hard. Same with my second two pregnancies. My second two pregnancies didn't even make it as far as my first pregnancy did. Not even close. So that was another thing that was super hard for me, was because I was pregnant 3 times, but I had nothing, no proof, I guess you say, other than a shit ton of pregnancy test sticks that had my pee all over them. Had that, and I still have them. But that's really hard to be pregnant and know that you're carrying a life, but you have absolutely nothing to show, to prove that that life is valuable, that that life is real, and that it should be celebrated. So after our transfer, that was the very first time that I actually got a picture, and that was the first time that I actually had something to show. Obviously I couldn't take a pregnancy test then, but I legit had 2 healthy growing embryos in my uterus. I was pregnant for those days. So we will end this introduction here, and I will pick up, and we will probably do, I'll definitely do a pregnancy video explaining our pregnancy, and I might try and do a video with like our reveal to our family. So I really hope that y'all enjoy it and like it. You can like and subscribe down below. I guess that's what everybody says. I will talk to y'all later. Bye.